So you have come here for information? I have some for you. You are all going to die.
This might seem like a normal sequence from one of the highest grossing, most acclaimed fantasy epics of all time, but it's actually the reason for a rift between two of the film industry's most beloved professionals, Peter Jackson and Christopher Lee. One, a once-in-a-generation director with a long and very storied career. The other is one of the most iconic and celebrated actors ever. See, Jackson got to start making low-budget, avant-garde genre picks. Eventually, he would work his way up to the pinnacle of Hollywood filmmaking, while Lee, well, you might recognize him for his turns as either the immortal vampire Dracula or the Sith Lord in disguise, Count Dooku. However, film fans of a certain generation will undoubtedly pinpoint him as the dastardly white wizard Saruman in the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit trilogies. Despite being a well-known actor by multiple era of film watchers, Christopher Lee, the man, was a very private individual, better known as Sir Christopher Frank Carradine Lee. So what happened here with Lord of the Rings, well, might surprise some people. See, Lee the person served in various military capacities, both the Finnish army and the English Air Force, prior to his career as a performer. In fact, he didn't even begin pursuing acting until he was about 40 years old. So what Lee did not anticipate, given not really being raised in the industry, is the gray areas of artistic collaboration. When making a movie, thousands of choices have to be made. Some as small as what color a character's jacket should be, others as large as whether a famous actor makes the final cut of a film, which is exactly what happened between Lee and Peter Jackson during the filming of Lord of the Rings. Christopher Lee was cast to play the iconic villain Saruman in the Lord of the Rings films. During the filming of the first two films, Lee and Jackson became quite close, according to, well, everyone around them. However, after the completion of The Two Towers, the filmmaking pair had a nasty falling out. Lee was incensed by what Jackson had done with his character in the climax of The Two Towers.
You were very cold about it.
I wasn't cold about it.
The 7-minute sequence was filmed in which Lee's character is ultimately defeated by the Fellowship and plunges to his death, becoming impaled on a spike of a dilapidated windmill. Despite the best of intentions from Jackson, running time for the sequence was deemed too long, which is ironic given the running time of the film. The sequence functions as a sneaky homage to one of the many deaths Lee's Dracula character suffered in his Hammer horror franchise 7-film run. This scene literally shows the death of the Fellowship's ultimate enemy. By the time the film saw theatrical release, however, this sequence was removed from that cut. At the time, Jackson said his intention was to have his reveal be the opening sequence of the next film in the series, The Return of the King. That was the explanation for the chopping of that scene on the cutting room floor. Jackson told Ain't It Cool News in 2003, the problem is the sequence was originally shot for The Two Towers, as it is in the book. Since The Two Towers couldn't sustain a 7-minute wrap-up after Helm's Deep, we thought it would be a good idea to save it for the beginning of Return of the King. Trouble is, when we reviewed various Return of the King cuts over the last few weeks, it felt like the first scene wrapping up last year's movie instead of starting a new one. We felt it got Return of the King off to an uncertain beginning since Saruman plays no role in the events. We don't have the Shire like the book does, yet we dwell in Isengard for quite a long time before the story kicked off. Well, Christopher Lee didn't like that, and this reasoning did not comfort him at all.
I can't do it, Peter. I'm sorry.
From Lee's perspective, this was a massive betrayal. Was it within Jackson's contractual rights to do this? Of course. But Lee was decidedly unhappy with how this omission affected the finished film. He initially didn't like the idea of the climax of his character's arc being featured in the beginning of another film, but then became accustomed to the idea. However, upon hearing that his Saruman scene had been cut from Return of the King as well, he got a little more upset.
You have elected the way of pain!
He felt The Two Towers lacked an ending, and that with Saruman's death being taken out of Return of the King, his character was sent off without the respect he deserved, both personally, artistically, and fictionally. We were shown the films in private, and when the third film came on, I couldn't believe what I saw.
Because I wasn't in it.
Christopher Lee told the University of College Dublin in 2011. It shows Saruman, the Fellowship's great mortal enemy, as the most evil of villains, on top of the tower, saying very nasty things to them, to Aragorn.
This exile, crept from the shadows, will never be crowned king.
The final confrontation between the Fellowship and that greatest enemy.
It wasn't in the film.
No one could understand it. There were millions of hits on the internet. They all said the same thing. What happened to Saruman? Buy the extended DVD. Well, that was ultimately the solution that Jackson and company had landed on. They realized they could utilize the footage of Saruman and his final confrontation for an extended edition DVD product that would make a bunch of money. This solution angered Christopher Lee even more.
Here we go.
He felt that this was choosing commerce over artistic integrity. He felt that this decision was motivated solely by the potential for financial windfall, as opposed to what the story and fiction required. Now, it's worth pointing out that for the most part, these decisions are actually made by studios, not Peter Jackson. Regardless, this is one of the most difficult aspects of producing work collaboratively. A director has to balance not only what is best for the movie, but the various egos and personalities around the people involved with the project. And that includes the people at the studios that never take a step on set. In some ways, that's just as challenging as telling a good story. Christopher Lee was so upset at the outcome that he boycotted the premiere of Return of the King. He and Jackson didn't speak for a number of years, Jackson even admitting that he knew that Lee was very upset. However, eventually the two men would come back together, and they did, nearly a decade later. Peter Jackson was helming an expanded version of The Hobbit, which was being fleshed out into a full trilogy of films, which, is a whole different can of worms about why we tell stories concisely. Jackson invited Lee back into the fold, offering him an opportunity to reprise his role. Lee accepted and appeared in the film as the iconic magician. Eventually, Jackson did say that he talked to Christopher about coming to the premiere, and he said, "Am I still in the movie?" And this time I could say yes. Lord of the Rings was a Herculean effort by all counts. The films took nearly a decade of Peter Jackson's life, thousands of people, and a combined $300 million. And to be fair to everyone involved, the one complaint lodged towards the Lord of the Rings theatrical cuts is that they were a little bloated, which is ironic given a lot of fans now love the extended cuts even more, which are 3.5 to 4 hours long. Studios just don't expect the average moviegoer to go see a 3-hour movie. There are exceptions to this rule, but The Lord of the Rings was a risk to begin with, financially, for the people in suits. Thankfully, Jackson and Lee were amicable and reunited their friendship after some time, but this is never an easy situation to deal with, to be sure. But it's one that many creative people find themselves in, and it's one that every creative person needs to look inside and prepare for, because if you're attempting to produce work on any scale, let alone $1 billion in a decade of your life, this will happen. And the other thing you can do is try to be respectful to all parties and do what's right for the work. Understand your vision and compromise as long as your vision remains what you see. Be true to what you believe in, maybe not true to extended cut DVD sales, but listen along the way. Other people are smart, they have good ideas. Vision isn't narrow when you work with people you respect, and that vision will become the collaborative part of the process. Well guys, that's it for this episode of Nerdstalgic. If you enjoyed this one, press the like button down below. Also hit subscribe. And on your screen right now should be 2 more episodes. Click on either of those to, stay right here. And hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one.